Hello, Carol Taylor-Kearney here at Powell Arts, and I am today with Maria Strano, who's going to tell us about her colorful painting. Maria?
Thank you. This project, I was giving a prompt to do either a loud or a quiet scene, and I'm a very ambitious artist, so I challenged myself to try to do those both in one painting.
I love this, yeah.
So I split up with the difference of like doing cold and warm. And I took inspiration from Edward Hopper's Nighthawks of how you have like this cold, snowy outdoors with like isolated sidewalks, while inside there's like a rave, a party going on in like a busy Italian restaurant.
I love this.
I love it too, because you really do. I mean, even in your reds on the outside, they're cool. It's a cool red. Even in the yellows, it's a cool yellow.
Mhm.
So we can literally feel ourselves standing out there cold, and all this warmth and light just comes out at us.
And you can feel the quietness of the street, and yet you know if you were walking in the shoveled path, you would be able to hear what's going on in there. But from the distance that you're standing at, it would be a silent, still, cold night, and you're looking at this loud, raucous, well, not raucous, but this loud, happy warmth, which I think is great.
That's why it's kind of named Outside, because you're the one outside.
Yeah, and you definitely feel like you're crossing the street towards this piece.
That you're hoping to go in there too. So did you think about this in terms of warmth and cool and light and dark?
Yeah.
Could you give us a little more about the composition, how you came up with working it this way?
Well, I really wanted it to be very like a juxtaposition, like a very much like contrast. So the best way to deal with like the main theme of like loud versus like soft, I thought of associating colors as well with that. And I feel like louder colors tend to be more warm stuff.
Yeah.
And like the colder colors tend to be more like soft and like silent. And that's how I tried to incorporate it with splitting it. And then like the composition itself is like split up into thirds.
Right.
Both ways.
Right. And you really take advantage of rectangles.
Yes.
So what gave you, so you looked at the hopper and that's what gave you the idea?
The composition idea, yes. But I also looked at more like impressionistic pieces.
Which you can see with the brush dabs and things like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. When you were approaching this, like, how did you start? Like, because you're using two different, not palettes exactly, but you're using a strong juxtaposition between the two sets of colors. And so I would imagine that was something you had to deal with while putting paint on canvas. Mm-hmm. How did you approach that? Because they really are strong contrasts.
So what was your first stroke?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm asking.
My first stroke was actually putting on like a really dark blue base. So a lot of like throughout here, the base actually pops through, because I feel like when you have that dark base and you go to put that lights and like warmth on it, it makes it even more like pop.
So did you do, like, after you did the blue base, did you then start by shading the strong warms and then the strong cools so that they were right next to each other? Or did you do all of the cool areas and then all of the warm areas?
I did all of the cool areas first, just so like I had my like sketch out to make sure everything was like proportionate and where I wanted it to be. But I feel like I started this part first just to frame out the building and know exactly. And then the last part I did was I had like the little impressions of the people. Mm-hmm. But I worked with like the lights and like their details and their little meals. I counted all the people too. I made sure like there's exactly 40 people in there.
That's wonderful.
I love it.
Well, I also love the gesture of some of the different people, because that Hopper actually used his wife Josephine as the model for Nighthawks, and she's the one person in there who's doing any kind of gesture. And yet we have a waiter here who's going and working on the table, and I'm worried that he's going to spill the drinks there. And you have a nice group here who are enjoying themselves, and another group here, and they all stand out from the pinkish, orangish, and then yellow in the background.
Yeah, they're nice little vignettes each
Yeah.
unto themselves.
That you could go back in over and over again. So Hopper modeled it on his wife in this place that he knew. When you were doing the vignettes, were you modeling?
I didn't have a specific model. However, a lot of this restaurant is kind of based off of the idea of my uncle's Italian restaurant. And that's why I specifically was like, I know this is Italian, so it's just based off of like.
It's not just the wine.
Yeah.
His restaurant is Speranza in Westville.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh, yeah.
It's like a similar like.
My sister
street.
loves his pizza.
Like, yeah, and the big windows.
Right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times when we go in and pass, it's like crazy in there. It's like always like pretty busy.
And it has a warm, inviting feel. I think that one of the things that's interesting about, not to harp on the warm versus cool, is a lot of times, warm pops forward. And yet it's actually in this sitting back. And I think you've done a really nice job of kind of balancing that, because it does feel like I'm looking in. They're not popping off the page. They're well framed so that I do feel like the warmth is inviting me in instead of popping out.
Yeah. No, it's beautifully done. I also, aside from the composition and it being based on some of your life experience and South Jersey life experience, I also was wondering, like, do you look at art history? You were saying you thought of Edward Hopper for this.
And then the Impressionists too, yeah.
Yes. So do you often look at art history for inspiration?
I do. I mean, it does help that I was doing this in college and I just graduated. And so, like, my final classes were, like, art history, too, and, like, modern art history. So I was doing those classes while I was painting it. And I tend to paint whatever is in my life at the moment. Whatever, like, I'm experiencing.
Well,
and this was, like, I finished this around Christmas time, which is hence the snow.
Yeah. Well, I think that we were talking about we've been talking with some of the other artists, how there's not really a definitive edge between your personal and your creative and your societal life. And so they all bleed into each other and inform and make a conversation like within yourself and then within the piece, which I think is interesting because we're telling stories about who we are or what we're thinking about in our pieces.
And
sorry. Go.
I was going to say, it's really important to, like, for me personally, I get my best pieces out of doing things that are, like, current and, like, happening to me. And it's nice to see my portfolio, having them in order and being able to, like, reflect on the times.
No, with that, what I was sitting there thinking is you use a lot of imagination, because if you're basing it on Hopper, there isn't a whole lot of action. There's the guy who's at the bar, and then there's the woman who's sitting there, and somebody else, and you have this lively company. And then I look up, and the windows at the top just invite me into. It's just more light, almost like, how there's spotlights that come down on you. Yeah. So I get sucked in to the whole warmth of this very cool painting, and that's not easy to do. What gave you the idea to include the windows and not crop that out?
The windows
At the top, yeah.
It's kind of like based off of like different like city buildings, and so usually there's windows there.
Yeah.
But the lights specifically, I felt like having them be a tiny bit warm and like alluding that there's people in there too.
Yeah.
It's still it just really sells it up like you're outside while everyone's inside. So like even though you don't really see people in there, the lights are on, so it kind of.
So you know that somebody is home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and it really does allude to that and to the whole idea that this is a human community.
Mm.
You know that some of these people frolicking down here probably live up there. Short walk,
Yeah.
short walk home. So I hope that you come see this beautiful luminous painting at Powell Arts from now until November 20th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria.